Is the most genuine you see Trump? Yeah. I mean, he's good. He's good in these moments, man. He's good. You know what I mean? Threat to people at DNC testing COVID positive. Be careful, sir, and test, please. I mean, honestly, I think I lucked out. There's like a lot of people getting COVID from the DNC, but I think me being so fucking dialed in and just like away from other people the entire time and also not going to any of the fucking parties, I guess I just I guess I dodged that shit. Yeah. Is this genuine interest in asking Theo questions? Is this what people who care do? And he usually doesn't give a fuck. I'm genuinely surprised that Trump understands about quitting alcohol. You broadcasting away from the pros in your castle before getting kicked out. Good to have dodged it. Bro, I didn't even go to the floor. Like I'm just thinking about like what I'm just thinking about like what might have saved me in that situation. Anyway, I should I mean, I'll test regardless. But as I was saying, it's not surprising that Trump is like cold turkey, or not even cold turkey, but just like straight up doesn't touch any of this stuff, because his brother was an alcoholic, and he like briefly alludes to it. He mentions it a little bit, but like that's why he's straight edge. He doesn't touch any of that stuff, like at all. What is this? COVID wave in 5 days before the DNC rolls out. Chicago was sick, actually. I had no idea. Okay, to be fair, I'm the only motherfucker who didn't get it though. What the fuck?
Back on and
Do you drink? Not as much. Like, not really. I'm not a big drinker. I used to be a big drinker. I am not a big drinker any longer.
You don't control it?
it's tough. It goes downhill
No
pretty
kidding.
quick.
So
You think it's going to be
you
easy.
think you're controlling it.
And then you're damn,
Boy,
you're
that's
doing
tough.
your go-kart and racing
So
with
the only
hookers
way
and
you
stuff.
can
It gets
do
bad.
Is just not to do it, right?
Right. So then in the end, you're like, I have to not do it. Did you see, like, with your brother, could you see it or anything? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Man.
I
that's a
was
bummer.
amazed because he had so much going, he had everything going. I think it happened in college at a fraternity maybe, or I don't know, somewhere along the line it happened. And all of a sudden, this is not unique. This is a very common story, unfortunately. But and then the family would see it and start to notice it. And it didn't get better. It didn't get better. I was amazed. He lived for so long in bad conditions, in terms of, I was amazed that his body could hold out. It held out, and it had bad moments. But his body was unbelievably strong that it could withstand this.
Yeah, it's a body. Your body's just so resilient.
Yeah.
Do you remember the last time that you saw him or spent with him?
I do. And
Bro, this is straight up charming, okay? It's crazy. Like, Donald Trump at his rallies is like it feels like an entirely different demon, okay? Getting up close and personal like this is legitimate. Like, this is when people were talking about like the Mike Malek, Logan Paul interview and shit. It wasn't like this at all. That was regular ass Trump. That was just like him just doing a rally, but to Logan Paul and Mike Malek. This is unironically, like, remember how people were mad at Jimmy Fallon for humanizing Trump and like playing with his hair? Okay. That was like something that people were mad about. This is so much worse.
I'm sorry to ask you about it. Is it all
yeah,
right?
no, it's well, the reason it's good talking about it is it might help other people. If it helps one other person, it's worth the conversation. Frankly.
We talk about that stuff a lot on our podcast.
Yeah.
A lot of our audience struggles or has struggled with alcoholism, addiction, intimacy disorders, all types of stuff. You know, so it's like it's pretty kind of normal conversation. But
you know, the interesting thing is, and I tell people, so I never had a cigarette, and I've never had a glass of alcohol. And my brother was incredible. He would tell me, because he knew he had a problem, and he'd say, don't ever drink, don't ever smoke. He'd always add smoking, because he did smoke a lot, which is, you know, not very healthy. But he'd say, don't ever drink, don't ever drink. He'd tell me every time. I said, don't ever drink, because he knew he had this addiction. And I never had a glass of alcohol. Never, ever did I have a glass of alcohol because of him. And I would say that if I did drink, I could, you know, conceivably be the type of personality that would have, like you, that would have a problem. But I never had. And the only thing I say to people is, if too late for the people that you're talking about, but if you don't drink, you don't miss it. I mean, I don't even think about alcohol or
right. It's not a part of your world.
I don't think about cigarettes. I don't think about any of that. If you don't take drugs or if you don't have alcohol, it's real easy not to drink it. It's when I had a friend who went to the Wharton School of Finance with me. He was a very smart guy.
Where is it, Wharton School?
That's in Philadelphia. That's at Penn.
Oh, yeah. Rocky.
Right. And it's a great school, great business.
I like Rocky. And then they put a fucking photo of Rocky up. That's hilarious.
Business school. And it's part of the University of Pennsylvania, the business school. At
it's nice down there.
Yeah.
My friend's brother went there or something.
Well,
we ate near there
Then
once.
he was smart because it's a great school. But this person that I met, he hated the taste of scotch. Hated it. Couldn't stand it. But he insisted on having it because he felt it was important to be able to drink. I said, no, just don't drink. He said, you know, to be successful in business, you have to sort of interact and you have to drink. And I said, don't do it. Anyway, he became an unbelievable alcoholic, uncontrollable alcoholic.
Oh, I thought you meant like one of the best.
Yeah, and he died. He was but he hated the taste of scotch.
And he still
he couldn't live without it. Wow. Literally.
Well, I think I notice a lot of like in the recovery rooms and stuff, it's a lot of people that they're missing something inside of them. And so they take on like, you know, so they want to try and fill it up with something else. Yeah. Do you remember the last time that you spent with your brother?
I do. And he'd have periods where he'd get sick, very sick. And we thought we'd lose him or we lost him. Then he'd get better. And that happened 5 or 6 times. I mean, well, you thought you lost him. And then he got better. And it was amazing. I mean, he was, you know, certainly very strong in that sense. And I just tell people it's so tragic. Don't drink. Just don't drink.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have a problem. Like even you, if you didn't drink, you would never, but you probably, maybe you wouldn't be successful like you are. You know, it's part of your story, right?
It's helped me a lot. Yeah. Because I don't know what would happen probably. I think it's just too risky.
It is risky.
What's something that you miss about him, or like that? Like what's something that you miss about him, Fred?
Well, he was wise in a sense. I mean, think of it. He's got this problem, and it was very important for him to convey to me not to have this problem. And I couldn't have been successful if I had that problem.
Yeah.
If I had that problem, and I think maybe I'm a personality type where I could have had the problem if I drank. But if you don't drink, you're never going to have it. I mean, I don't miss when I see somebody light up a cigarette and just they're in heaven. I don't miss that at all.
It's weird. It's so it's very Native American too.
Isn't it crazy?
It's bizarre. And you know, I think sometimes our older brothers, they kind of like they take the speed bumps for us, like as younger brothers, so that we don't have to. You know what I'm saying? Does that you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
like my brother went through a lot of stuff so that I didn't have to go through it, and then I get to see him and learn.
Is he okay now?
Yeah, he's doing great now. But it's like. Yeah, that's one of the blessings, I think, of having an older brother.
Well, you can learn through history, too, even if it's not a brother. It's by watching other people. I mean, you can see if you have a friend who's an alcoholic, or even just by reading about people, you can learn.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a brother, but in this case, it was very personal. It was a brother, and I learned not to drink, and I learned not to smoke cigarettes. Now, I don't know that I would have smoked cigarettes. I probably would have drank. I think, you know, there's no reason not to drink. But I had a reason because he told me, you know, just
that was it.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. was kind of a blessing then, huh?
Yeah.
And where did you guys ever do anything fun together? Like one nice memory that you have with him?
He had a great talent for flying. He was a pilot.
Oh, sweet.
And he loved it. And
did you ever fly with him?
I did. I flew with him. He was a great pilot and a very talented. Other pilots would come to his house to...
Why is Theo so anti-corporate, anti-billionaire, but a Trump dick rider who inhales his bullshit with a smile? I mean, that's like, he's a normie, you know? Like in his mind, he's like, I'm interviewing a former president. I think a lot of people just like don't contextualize it in that same way. It's kind of like, I mean, I'm anti-corporate, anti-billionaire, but I like JB Pritzker. You know what I mean? Do you see what I'm saying? And he's also like charming to him. He's just doing like a regular interview. He's having like a normal conversation. I don't think he has like any sort of political ambitions or aspirations here. Like he's not trying to get something out of him. He's not trying to have like a gotcha or anything like that. It's because he's kind of stupid. He'd admit to being kind of dumb too because he's aware. Yeah. And also, I think overall, like, I mean, he had that point in the Bernie interview too. Like, he had that point in the Bernie interview as well, where he was like, you know, you and Trump, like, you were the anti-establishment candidates, like, or something like that. He was like, you were the outsiders, right? And like, you know, he said that. Like, he said that in that interview. He's like, oh, I wanted you and Trump to run together. Like, like that's it. That's it. Like, that's literally it. What you see is what you get. I don't think there's like any sort of cynical reason. He's not like, yeah, I'm gonna go and make Trump look like more of a human dude. Like, I don't think he's operating like that. Dude, I'm kind of sick of everyone giving Theo this he's so dumb pass. He's not a child. I mean, okay, but Theo's a college grad. He ain't dumb. There are plenty of people who graduated from college that are definitely very dumb, okay? Yes, this is a perfect way to explain it. He's unaware of the implications of having a political figure on his show. He isn't trying to be confrontational or glaze him up. He just thinks it would be cool to have a former president on a show. That's it. People don't like when Trump is humanized because it's a reminder that someone who has gone through hardships could turn into someone like Trump, but it's important to show people how they could go wrong. Bro, Theo plays up a character. I don't know how y'all are so fooled by this. He's 44 years old, multiple college attended. He understands what he's doing. It's a bit. I don't think so. Like, I think he's a genuinely curious person. As far as what I've seen, I think he's just like a actually curious person who doesn't think much. I think you guys are... I think you guys are like placing a lot of emphasis on like, one, a college education that like immediately spells that you're an intelligent human being, which is far from the truth. Okay. Two, I think that you also don't realize that even people who vote, okay, even people who fucking vote, even people who vote for either party or whatever, don't necessarily have a lot of opinions beyond like, oh yeah, I just kind of voted. Like, most people don't think about this the way that you do. Okay? You need to understand that. Most people do not think about stuff like this the way that you do. We're fucking nerds, chat. That's why I'm always pleasantly surprised when I see someone in the wild who does have maybe not like the same interest that I do, but at least like, even if they don't have the theory, right? Their heart is in the right place. Like, I get excited when I see that. Like, even if someone doesn't have the best way of communicating, like a leftist worldview or whatever, oftentimes if they're and I'm not talking about Theo in this same way. I'm simply this is a sidestep from the conversation. But like sometimes you'll meet someone who isn't like an out and about leftist, would never call themselves that way, right? They would never say they're a leftist. They wouldn't even say they're a liberal. But like they'll say certain things, especially you see this a lot in working class backgrounds. Okay? Like people that have actually seen and experienced poverty, right? Like oftentimes they'll say certain things about their experiences with their bosses and whatnot, where you're like, oh, this dude gets it. You know what I mean? That's why I always have this belief that I stick to, that like the average American is actually significantly more open-minded to progressive policies than the people that you see online. You know what I mean? The people that are chirping online, the people that are like supposedly very educated on this stuff. Does that make sense? Do you think it's one, because it's good content? Two, he's scared of alienating conservative viewers by only having Bernie on? No, I don't think he's making that calculation even. Dude, I'm telling you, it feels like he literally is just going, that's a former president, dude, and he's running for president. It'll be good content. And also, a lot of people will watch it. Would you say that most Americans are somewhat class conscious? Fuck no. It's actually class consciousness that is missing from the equation for Americans. They understand certain concepts, but they don't know how to conceptualize it, if that makes sense. No, Americans are some of the least class conscious motherfuckers on the planet, dude. Have you met Theo? Is he like this always? I've never met Theo Vaughn. He has a certain style and character he portrays on camera, but it's not a bit. It's weird how often people mix those two up. People tend to put on a show of sorts when they're in entertainment business.
Study with him.
Watch him fly.
And he was really talented at that, but ultimately he had to give that because of the alcohol.
I'm new to your community and new to you. Where are your viewpoints on Kamala and the DNC? I was holding out hope that Kamala Harris, because of a couple things that the Democratic Party did, was going to be leaning into a message of like truly helping the American working class. And unfortunately, I didn't really get that from the DNC. And it upset me for sure. I mean, we'll see where it goes. There's 71 days, but some of the high notes, especially like I placed a lot of emphasis on the speech that she delivered on the last night of the DNC, because we don't know how she is going to brand herself. We don't necessarily know what kind of policy she's going to run with. And unfortunately, it's been very devoid of policy in general so far. There's a couple things that they talked about. There's a couple things that she brought forward before the DNC that I liked. Price controls, which is like unimaginably popular, unimaginably popular. So I think that like those things are good. Those concepts are good, but like she's not really running on them. And it spells, for me at least, that this is an old school Democratic Party way of thinking, where they run scared and they try to moderate their positions. I mean, I saw this poll, which is crazy. Support for capping increases on food and grocery prices. Support 65%, opposed 24%. And I joked, I said, oh man, the Chamber of Commerce is going to see this poll and roll out Chris Hardball Matthews one last time to talk about how Kamala will bring out the guillotines at Central Park. Like, I fear that, like, and this was a fear that I had with Bernie Sanders. Like, if I'll explain it in a couple different ways. One, I have this opinion that if Bernie Sanders were to actually make it to the general, we would have fully been able to figure out if you can actually run on super progressive campaigns and win incredible margins. Okay. So we never got to see that because the primary is like locked to the diehard loyalists of the Democratic Party for the most part. Most people don't participate even in the general election, but even less people participate in the primaries, right? Most people, when I was door knocking, didn't even know that a fucking primary was happening. They were pro Bernie, but they didn't even know the primary was happening. And for them, it's like going out, registering to vote, all this stuff. It's a difficult process. You don't get to truly understand that until you actually do it. And like canvassers will tell you, it's a fucking massive effort, right? And because of that, we never actually got to see, even if it wasn't Bernie, it doesn't matter. Like whoever it was, if they were, because Bernie's method was to activate the non-voters and the youth vote, right? But that was never going to happen in the primaries, and it demonstrably didn't happen in the primaries. And it's a major reason why Bernie Sanders lost the primaries, right? Like that was objectively a failure twice. Okay, not once, twice. First time, Bernie was very lucky and even got more popularity than he normally would have otherwise because he was running against an objectively unpopular candidate like Hillary Clinton. Second time around, like I said, it was a difficult endeavor. Okay, it was a very difficult endeavor. But I suspect that because there is obviously a lot more people paying attention to the general, I've always had this suspicion that if a candidate like Bernie was on the ballot in the general and was the Democratic Party's candidate, he would be like, he would do Ronald Reagan levels of popularity. Like you would actually be able to activate these non-voters for the general, because then they start actually taking notice of what's going on. Now, there's at least one example I can point to in that regard. Bra, he's 82. Guys, I'm not talking about this time around. I'm giving you an analysis of what went wrong with the Bernie primary campaign as in an effort to talk about something that's larger than the Bernie primary campaign. It doesn't matter that it's fucking Bernie Sanders. He's just one real life example that I'm using to explain to you what it looks like when someone runs on a fucking primary or when someone runs on a progressive message, and then whether or not they are able to activate the non-voters and the youth vote in general. Okay. That's it. Stop fucking talking about here's how Bernie could have won, or stop talking about how like Bernie was actually fucked over by the DNC and that's why he lost. Like, yeah, those are other factors. Okay. The DNC thing is a factor for sure. But like, I'm giving you the actual, congratulations. You won emos and furries to your location. What the fuck? Anyway, the closest we ever got to like seeing what it would look like in a general election where you had like an actually outwardly progressive campaign was with Barack Obama in 2008. Okay. That was a progressive campaign and objectively one of the most popular candidates in modern history. Okay. So there is at least like one parallel that we can draw there in terms of like what it looks like when you run a progressive message campaign. Okay. Another issue, having said that, however, another issue that I always felt if Bernie were to run in the general, and this is something that I talked about quite a bit at that time, was how the media would treat him. Because there were already like, you know, Goldman Sachs CEOs and whatnot. They were writing op-ed pieces when it seemed like Bernie might win the primaries about how Trump would potentially be a better president than Bernie Sanders because he's a socialist and it's terrifying for corporate interests. So I was always fearful that even if Bernie got to the general, there was one other aspect of this equation that would probably cook his campaign or had the potential to cook his campaign. What was that? Media influence. Baba soslar geldi şu anda. Yo. Hayır. Çünkü sos yoktu. Ama şimdi bugün yine pişir ekmeği ve soslar da geldi. because the media is still very powerful in terms of like creating narratives, in terms of like basically gumming up the works, like handicapping a campaign by consistently pumping out like certain kinds of messages, and it's basically free marketing, right? It's basically free marketing. It was endlessly successful with the Joe Biden victory in the primaries after South Carolina, which everybody knew he was going to win. There was around $1.6 billion of earned and free media that the Biden campaign got that played a big role in him clearing out Super Tuesday in states that he never even campaigned at. So for that reason, I've always been fearful that, like, even if Bernie were to have somehow by some weird, some weird unforeseeable luck ever made it to the general, $1.3 billion in earned media. Earned media is a specific designation. Earned media is like, is basically like an ad that you are getting from the media, and it's more powerful than like paid media. And that $1.3 billion in earned media only happened over the course of like 2 days, by the way. That was an insane onslaught of positive messages. It's authentic. People do not read that as like an ad. Okay? So I was worried that if Bernie were to ever, by some weird luck, make it to the general election as the Democratic Party's candidate, I thought that the media would do everything it could possibly in its power to sully that process and to handily offer Trump a victory. This is a real fear that I always had. Now, why am I talking about Kamala? I mean, why am I talking about Bernie Sanders and all this shit? That's because the only fear that I have in terms of Kamala Harris running a progressive campaign and putting progressive policies forward in her campaign is the way that I fear the media would actually cook her on it. Okay? They've already briefly started doing it. Okay? This chatter says, clearer explanation of earned media. When there's a news story about you, it functions as an ad. Exactly. Every time she tries to propose progressive policy on stage, it's sold with deregulation and neoliberal solutions with progressive language. She's selling the whole building 3 million homes as just deregulation as an example. Every time we get actual plans for these policies, it's just neoliberal nonsense. Any excitement I had over her is going very rapidly every time she shows the actual plan to enact the policy. Yeah, so that is another side of this issue as well, but we're not going to get into that right now, okay? I'm talking about something a little different. So do you think Kamala would gain more support if she embraced Jill Stein level progressive policies? Do you think that Kamala should be leaning far left in policies to counter the Republican far right nonsense? It's not about far left or far right. I think that she should stick to more progressive policies. Hold on one second. Go grab my phone.